Hey folks, I wanted to give you some quick insight into how a total amateur producer like myself makes something like the Tony Rice Lo-Fi. I am not an expert at this by any means, but I wanted to show you how I do it as someone who's just vaguely interested in this style and how I turn the Tony Rice songs into lo-fi samples, specifically the latest one, Sweetheart Like You. The first thing that I do is I take the original audio file and I dump it into this website. It's called lol.ai, I guess. And you drop the file in here, you can get isolated stems. It does its best to separate out the stems. So, isolated vocal, isolated instrumental, isolated drums, etc. And it does a great job. So I do that first. And that means that I can hear what everything sounds isolated. For instance, you've probably never heard this before, but this is the isolated band track. Or, for instance, here's Tony's isolated vocal.
Well, the press is down, the boss ain't here, gone north for a while.
Does a really good job, right? And doing that gives us the freedom to do all of the chopping and cutting that we're going to do later. Now, there's one other trick that I have to show you before we get into the nitty gritty, and that is this phase cancellation trick that I use a lot. So let's look at like this moment over here. How about? So if we listen to these on their own, what I have is, I'm not talking about these two tracks right here. What I have is one track that has the band and Tony's vocal.
But he sure left here to start.
Right, and that's good, that's useful, but remember I already have the vocal on that other track up above. I don't want the vocal on this track. So if I take the isolated vocal, invert the phase, and play it against the track that has just the band with no drums and Tony singing, I can subtract the vocal from that. You still hear little clips of Tony singing. It's fuzzy in the background. You could probably do a better job, volume match, and get the phase reduction just perfect. I didn't bother to do that, but you could. And you can think of it as like a math equation, right? On one hand, we have this band with no drums and Tony singing. And normally, if you just played Tony's vocal on top of that, then, we just get a louder vocal, right? The vocal will just get louder because we have the vocal on two tracks, right? But because we've inverted the phrase, you can think of it as band with no drums, Tony singing, minus Tony's vocal equals just band with no drums. And that's the trick that I'm using on these two doubled tracks. Whenever you see these two tracks in the middle doubled, it's a phase inversion that's getting rid of Tony's vocal, basically. And the last isolated thing that I have down here is the drum sound. So you listen to the drum sound down here. I thought that sounded a little swampy, a little underwater or something, so I did double that with a lo-fi sample, and this sample is the only thing that's not original to the track. This is the lo-fi sample with the original drum track. And those hi-hats and stuff, I think, just add a little more body to the drums, to the rhythm section. So I take all of these isolated samples, the phase inversion, everything, and I cut it up and I try to get it to align to the grid. So I have my tempo set at 70 BPMs. It's more or less where the recording is. And I just line everything up because when they recorded Sweetheart Like You, they didn't do it to a click track, which would make the whole thing really hard to chop up if I can't get it grid aligned. So I have to get everything in time, in time to the grid, as opposed to just the cool groovy feeling of playing along to a live drummer, which is a shame, but it just makes the whole process so much easier. And from there, with everything isolated, with everything aligned to the grid, the phase cancellation and all of that, I can start chopping things up. So let's look at this first kind of cool moment that happens. It sounds like this.
They say that
there's a lot of things that go into that. We can hear initially it starts out with just that isolated piano with phase cancellation, right? And then we start chopping things up, right? So I'm grabbing saxophone samples and I'm repeating them. On the bottom here, This one track right here that I have highlighted is what we call a riser. I've taken a chord being played and I've reversed it so it feels like it's like crescendoing. So we have a riser there. Like I said, we have all these little chopped up saxophone moments that sound like this. Right, with the riser underneath. Looks like there's another big riser right here too. And then on top of that, we have this like glitching stuttering effect. It's actually the same. It's one of the same clips of the sax, but I've set my my grid to like 64th notes, and I've cut out every other one. So if I drag all these out, as if I hadn't cut out, every other 64th note, you can start hearing what the original sample sounded like. Let me do one more. And you can hear how it's going to feel glitchy and chopped up over here, but it's going to feel like the original sample over here. That gives you an idea of how that works. It's really small, kind of like detail-oriented work, and it can take some time. Also, on top here, I've added Tony saying, haha. Haha. Which is somewhere else in the song. I just grabbed it and dragged it over.
Gone for a while. They say that vanity got the best of him.
And then we're back in. And I'm kind of delicate about how much of the song that I want to change because I just enjoy this song in general. So a lot of this is just kind of the lo-fi sample and then the isolated tracks mixed in a specific way.
But he sure left here to start.
Besides the drum sample, there's not a whole lot that's different right there. But then I start chopping up the saxophone again, right? In the track, it sounds like this.
By the way,
and that's the same tricks, right? I'm carefully picking sax samples, and I'm also changing the octaves of things. I think that's the same clip. One of them's just an octave higher. You can see transpose 12, right? It's been moved up an octave. That stuttering effect is once again the same trick, right? 64th notes, all cut up. And you can see that this doesn't have the phase inversion on top for whatever reason, so we can hear some of Tony's vocal creeping in. Is that a mistake? Maybe.
By the way, that's a cute hat, and the smile is so hard.
Because we have all the isolated stems, we can choose when the drums come in and out. So in the original song, there's drums right there.
Cute hat, and the smile is so hard to.
But in ours, we drop the drums.
Way, that's a cute hat. And the smile is so hard to resist.
You can hear me dropping some crackle in here when he says Lord.
Lord. What?
That crackle is generated using a plugin. It's a Waves plugin. I believe it's the Abbey Road vinyl simulation. So if we open this up, we change some settings, we can hear some crackle. And you can dial in how you want this to sound. Obviously in the song I haven't used it that aggressively, but you could use it that aggressively if you wanted to. Let's keep going.
What's a sweetheart like you doing?
That's the same trick, right? I'm repeating Tony's vocal.
Doing in the dump like this.
But here's one of my favorite things that's in the song. In the original recording, there's no harmony part. So when he says doing in a dump like this,
Doing in a dump like this.
there is no harmony vocal right there, but it's such a sweet spot for a harmony vocal, so I created one.
Doing in a dump like this.
How did I create that harmony vocal? Well, I duplicated Tony's vocal and I dropped it into Melodyne.
Doing in a dump like this.
And if you put those together, you got a harmony. It sounds like Tony saying harmony to himself.
Doing in a dump like this.
I love it. More cutting up Tony's vocal. You can hear some octave stuff going on here in this one.
You know once new.
In the track, it sounds like this.
You know once knew a woman who looked like you. Look.
Once again, in the original track, there's drums. Right?
Once knew a woman who looked like you. She wanted a whole man.
I didn't want drums right here.
No, once knew a woman who looked like you. Look like.
I wanted the chimes to happen again too.
Once knew a woman who looked like you. She wanted a whole man, not just a hair. She used to call me sweet, call me sweet, call me sweet child.
You can hear me using the same trick with the harmony vocals, right? So these vocals are creating harmony to Tony.
Call me sweet, call me sweet.
They're kind of funny to listen to on their own. Let's see if we can hear the higher one.
Call me sweet.
That sounds the same. That's funny. There's a third part there.
Call me sweet, child. You
Anyway, doesn't matter.
kind of remind me of her when you laugh. Ain't no
That's the same trick. I put some crackle under that, but it's just the octave up. This is funny because it covers up the rest of that line.
call me sweet, child. You kind of
She used to call me sweet baby when I was a child. Right? It's got like a different line right there. Instead, we're just repeating "call me sweet," which is really cool. Sometimes when I listen to the new one, I'm a little confused now because I'm so used to hearing this. I think this is where we grabbed the ha-ha from, by the way.
What's a sweetheart like you doing in a dump like this?
You can hear our harmony parts coming in here.
Doing in a dump like this.
Now, in the original song, he says, doing in a dump like this, and then he goes on to the next verse. But I thought, we could expand right here. And so I, do some chopping up of the sax. You can hear all of those isolated too if you want. I'm not super careful about what's happening underneath the saxophone. It kind of tends to just disappear in the mix, but there were some times where it didn't work and I had to be a little bit more careful. Anyway, and then Tony repeats the hook, which he doesn't do in the original
What's
song.
a sweetheart like you doing in a dump like this?
And this is where we get like the real kind of funky breakdown right here. And we got the crackle coming back in, bunch of chopped up sax. The phase cancellation is kind of like on purpose not perfect here. So in the background we just hear really softly. Some of those are probably pitch shifted and everything else. It takes time, but I just cut up the samples and try to make a new melody in an interesting way.
You know, a woman like you should be at home.
More harmonies that don't exist in the recording.
Be at home. That's where you belong.
You can hear the new harmony part that I've written for Tony to sing.
Be at home. That's where you belong.
It sits real nice in that recording. Here we go.
Be at home. That's where you belong. Taking
more things are chopped up. I'm not going to go into detail about all of these. Let's find something else interesting here. Let's skip ahead maybe to the end. Let's see. Here we go. So here's Tony's guitar solo. By the way, I've left this fairly unaltered. I repeat some notes and some phrases and stuff and do some octave changing. But it's more or less Tony's real break. I've added some little like chopped up saxophone stuff in the background and stuff. You'll hear it all in a second. So we can hear that grunt isn't in the recording. Right, we've dropped that grunt in, and of course we have those little like stuttery things in the background. A little saxophone clip. Right, we're repeating some phrases and stuff in his break. Here's the pitch shift moment, right? The bend that he's about to play, I've just shifted it back and moved it down an octave. So we hear him play that bend twice, one time the octave lower. Of course, I've dropped in another ha-ha. That should be someone's like text tone or something. How very like 2010 of me. Right, and then at the end here, in the original recording, of course, there would be drums. But I thought it would be pretty cool if we didn't have drums over that last sax part. It's very like spacey. And that's basically it. You know, could I have done more? Probably. Did I really want to do more? Nah, I think it's kind of good like this. It's more or less the original song, but we've repeated some phrases and, you know, done a little bit of arranging. I also think that, if I remember correctly, after this last chorus, I don't think he says, "What's a sweetheart like you?" I think that I've dropped this in here. I'll show you what I mean. It says, "You got to pick that guitar," and then I repeat the hook.
Pick that guitar. Until your fingers bleed. What's a sweetheart like you doing in a dump like, doing in a dump like, doing in a dump like this?
Of course, he doesn't repeat that hook over and over again like that. That's just something that I've manufactured. But yeah, other than that, that's the whole thing. I hope you enjoyed this little breakdown. Y'all have a good one.